Hello and welcome to my channel. In this episode, we will build a form in React Native with a submit button and a reset button. I hope to demonstrate how to use the useState hook and keep track of your form variables. Let's first learn what useState hook is, then we'll jump in and apply this in a code example. The useState hook is one of the most commonly used hooks in React. It enables us to manage state in a functional component. In this video, we'll cover everything you need to know about the useState hook. And I'll also walk you through an example where you can code along with. So let's start with the basics. In React, state is used to manage data that is rendered and updated in the UI. Before the introduction of hooks in React, state could only be used in class components. However, we can now use state in functional components as well. To manage state, then, in a functional component, we use the useState hook, of course. So let's see how this works. First, it returns an array with two items. The first item is the current state value that you want to keep track of in your UI. It could be an object, it could be anything you want. It could be an array, it can be a string, a number, a counter, it doesn't matter. The second item is a function that allows us to update the state value. Also make sure you use the proper naming conventions. Use any name for the variable name that you think is meaningful, but for the set function, make sure you use the keyword set plus the name of the variable. But it's highly recommended so that your code is easy to understand and maintain. useState hooks into React state and lifecycle features to keep track of our component state. It works inside functional components, not classes, and it has to be called at the top level of the component, not inside loops or conditionals. Lastly, it takes a parameter to set the initial value of our variable. Let's walk through an example where you can code along with me. In the example, we'll build a form and we'll learn how to set and update state variables, how to set objects or arrays, and also how best to reset state using a key that we can pass into our form. Finally, we'll cover some common issues and caveats, such as updating state and logging the old value when we expect the new value, or mutating an object state instead of replacing it with a new object. Let's open our terminal. In this example, I'll be demonstrating with the React Native app. You'll need to have your environment set up for React Native. Refer to the docs on the React Native website, or if you prefer, you can watch one of my previous videos on how to set up your environment. I'll leave a link below in the description. All right, so here in my terminal, I'm first going to create a new project by running npx React Native at latest init, and then my project name, whatever you want to call it. Next, let's go ahead and cd into the project directory and run npm i so we can install all our dependencies. Then once that's done, we're going to go ahead and run our app in iOS. And to do that, we're going to run the command npx React Native run iOS. All right, once our app is up and running, let's go ahead and open the code in VS Code. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to delete app.tsx and create a new file called app.js. Let's make a very basic app.js file with the bare minimum code. Next, I'll create a new file for our form component, and for this file, I'm just going to call it formdemo.js. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open the formdemo.js. Again, some bare minimum code here. One note to make here is we're importing the useState hook from React. And for now, I'm just importing a few components from React Native so we can display this form. So I've got the view component and a text component, and I'm just going to display form for now. And then I'm going to copy some style sheet styling to this form. I'm not going to go over this. If you guys are interested, I can leave the code, a link to this code in the description. So let's go ahead and export default the form demo. Then I'm going into app.js here, And I'm going to import the form demo so that we can display it in app.js. All right, once we've imported that, I'm back in form demo. And in here, I'm going to add some basic text input field and a button or a pressable component for a button. And then in my app, I'm going to go ahead and display the form demo. So let's go back to form demo and let's start creating our state variable. Here I'm going to call it a name, and then the set function is going to be set name equals useState, and then my initial state, I'm just going to say enter name. Basically, this is going to be the placeholder for a text input. So I'm going to set the property placeholder to name. And then on change, I'm going to set that name to whatever value the user inputs. So let's go ahead and add that function to set name. And then let me go ahead and pass that parameter into set name. We'll just call that value for now. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a text underneath the button so we can display what the user inputs for the name so that we can see as the state changes in our app. And here I made a mistake, it should be on change text. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our app. Here I've got my app running. I'm going to go ahead and input a name in this field. And as you can see, it's displaying as I was typing, as the state was changing. Let's go ahead and go back to our code. And I want to demonstrate something here. Let's go into our onChange text. And after we set the name, let's console log that state variable name and see what we get for this output. Basically, this is while the code is running, we want to see what this name variable is set to after we call the state name function. You would expect to see the updated name, but in actuality, you won't see it in the running code, but you will see it when the component re-renders. So if you take a look here, while I was typing in that running code here, you saw only partially, and then when it re-rendered, you'll see the full name. So now after the re-render, it's all the letters, but before that, we only saw up to the last time that the state was updated or that the component re-rendered. All right, now that we've done that, let's go ahead and demonstrate how we would set an object in our state. So I'm going to call this fields, and then the set function is set field. So this is very common in forms. If you've got multiple fields, you don't want to have 5 state variables. So it's much easier to maintain and cleaner for your code if you just set an object and set each field to a property on that object. So one thing you want to avoid here is don't mutate the object in your state like this. Fields.firstname equals val. Instead, you want to replace it with a new object. So I'm using the spread operator to spread out the fields and then replacing the first name with the new value. So let's go ahead and do the test again. We'll console log the object, and then let's go ahead and clear this terminal so we can see as we type what the output looks like. So as I'm typing and changing, the state is changing, and then the re-render looks correct here. So I'm just outputting the object instead of that name. So I'm going to go ahead and show you another way to get the re-rendered value. So let's say we have a button, and whenever you click on the submit, of course, that's going to happen after the re-render. So we should have access here after you press this button to the latest state value for our object. So as you can see on submit, my state has the new and updated value. So then you can add whatever logic you need to in your code here on your on submit function. All right, so now I am going to demo how to reset the form with a key value or a key property that we're going to pass to our form. So I'm going to create a new component called form with reset. And this is going to have a state variable called version, set version, initialized to 0. And then I'm going to wrap this form component in a view component here, and then with the form demo component and a reset button with an on press event to set the version number when we click on it. Now I need to change the app.js to import the form with reset instead of form demo. Since we're passing the version number as a key to the form demo, each time the version changes, React will recreate the form demo component from scratch, setting all state back to the initial state. Now let's see this in action. I'm going to enter a value and then I'll click this reset button. And notice when I hit the reset button that my initial value goes back to enter a value. Now I'm going to go back to this form and form demo, and I'm going to create or just copy this text input and create another field for the last name, just so we can have multiple fields and see that both fields are going to be reset when we hit that reset button. So let me just go ahead and make some cleanup code changes here and add this field as last name. We don't need any of this console.log statements, just very bare minimum. And then in the text field here, I'm going to go ahead and display the fields dot first name and the fields dot last name. All right, let me go ahead and wrap these in the input field. And then let me go ahead and add the styling around the input. I'm just going to copy the view component from the above text input. All right, so now that that's done, let's see this in action. I'm going to enter a first name, a last name, and as you can see as I'm typing, the input changes. If I hit submit, let's go ahead and bring up our terminal so we can see the on submit. I'm going to go ahead and change the on submit to display all the fields really quick, okay? All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete this so it displays all the fields. Now back in the terminal, you can see after I hit the on submit, we can see both the first and last name. And then when I reset the form and hit on submit, the fields go back to that initial state. That's enter first name and enter the last name. Okay, so this wraps it up for this episode. I hope you guys found this beneficial. If you liked this, please click the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.